All right, let's talk about Israel, specifically its birth, which, depending on who you ask, was either a miraculous return to a historic homeland or, well, a bit of a disaster for the people already living there. It's a story of ancient claims, modern politics, and a truly staggering amount of international meddling. The establishment of Israel in 1948 wasn't something that just happened overnight. It involves empires making promises they probably shouldn't have, international bodies drawing lines on maps, and a deep, enduring desire for a safe haven. But that desire clashed spectacularly with the people already calling that land home. Fast forward to today, 2025, and the echoes of Israel's controversial birth are louder than ever. So buckle up, because we're going on a historical and modern roller coaster through one of the world's most intractable conflicts. Let's rewind to 1917. World War I is raging, and the British government issues the Balfour Declaration. This little piece of paper declared British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Palestine was already inhabited by a significant Arab population who had their own ideas about who should be running the show. The declaration was a masterpiece of diplomatic ambiguity. It also stated that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The motivations were complex: a desire for Jewish support in the war effort, sympathy for Zionist aspirations, and British strategic interests in the Middle East. For Zionist leaders, the Balfour Declaration was a monumental victory. However, for the Arab population of Palestine, it was a betrayal. By 1947, Britain had well and truly had enough of trying to manage Palestine. The situation had become increasingly untenable, with rising tensions and frequent clashes between the Jewish and Arab communities. So they passed the Palestine problem to the newly formed United Nations, hoping for an international solution to this complex issue. The UN came up with a plan, UN Resolution 181, also known as the Partition Plan. This plan aimed to address the conflicting national aspirations of Jews and Arabs. The idea was to divide Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, with Jerusalem being designated as an international city under a special international regime. The proposed Jewish state was allocated about 56% of Palestine. Despite Jewish people comprising about a third of the population at the time, this allocation was seen as generous by some and unfair by others. The Arab state was to get the rest, but it was fragmented, consisting of several non-contiguous areas, which made governance and unity challenging. Jewish leaders officially accepted it, seeing it as a step towards establishing a homeland. Meanwhile, Arab leaders vehemently rejected the plan, viewing it as a betrayal and an unjust division of their land. The UN vote in November 1947 to adopt the partition plan passed, but its passage immediately poured gasoline on an already smouldering fire. The decision was met with jubilation by some and outrage by others. Violence between Jewish and Arab militias escalated sharply in Palestine. The streets became battlegrounds, and the conflict intensified with each passing day. The stage was set for a full-blown conflict as both sides prepared for what seemed like an inevitable war. As the British mandate neared its end, the situation in Palestine was deteriorating rapidly. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. For Jewish people around the world, it was a moment of immense triumph and relief. However, this new beginning for one people marked a catastrophic turning point for another. The very next day, armies from neighboring Arab states invaded the newly declared Israeli state. This was the start of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. For Palestinians, this period is known as the Nakba, meaning catastrophe in Arabic. By the time armistice agreements were signed in 1949, Israel controlled about 78% of mandatory Palestine. Around 750,000 Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled from their homes. The Nakba is not just a historical event for Palestinians, it's an ongoing trauma that shapes their identity and political aspirations. Fast forward to 1967. Tensions in the region had been simmering for years. In June of that year, Israel launched a series of preemptive airstrikes, igniting the Six-Day War. In just 6 days, Israel achieved a stunning military victory. It captured the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, and Golan Heights. For many Israelis, this was another miraculous victory. However, this expansion came with a whole new set of problems. With these new territories came a large Palestinian population, now living under Israeli military occupation. The question of what to do with these territories and their inhabitants remains one of the most contentious issues. Following the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel began one of the world's longest military occupations. This occupation has profoundly shaped the lives of millions of Palestinians. Successive Israeli governments have allowed the construction of Jewish settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. These settlements are a huge point of contention. For Palestinians, these settlements are a major obstacle to a two-state solution. Then there's Gaza. Israel unilaterally withdrew its settlements and military forces from the Gaza Strip in 2005. In 2007, after Hamas seized control of Gaza, Israel imposed a strict blockade on the territory. The Gaza blockade has created a chronic humanitarian crisis. It's often described as an open-air prison. The humanitarian consequences of this long-running conflict are grim. The ongoing blockade, coupled with recurrent rounds of intense military conflict, has pushed Gaza's inhabitants to the brink. As of late 2023 and into 2024, the situation escalated dramatically following attacks by Hamas and a massive Israeli military response. Reports from 2024 painted a horrifying picture. Over 100,000 cases of acute jaundice syndrome, suspected to be hepatitis A, tearing through Gaza. Hospitals were overflowing and people were displaced multiple times. The international response often feels like a broken record of condemnations and calls for ceasefires. Effective solutions seem perpetually out of reach. The legal and ethical dimensions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are as tangled and contentious as every other aspect. This conflict has deep historical roots, with both sides claiming rights to the land based on historical, religious, and cultural ties. For decades, UN resolutions have condemned Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as illegal under international law. These settlements are seen as a major obstacle to peace as they are built on land that Palestinians claim for a future state. Recently, the legal battles have escalated to the highest international courts. These courts are now being asked to weigh in on the legality of actions taken by both sides, adding a new layer of complexity to the conflict. In a significant advisory opinion on July 19, 2024, the International Court of Justice declared that Israel's prolonged occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem violates international law. This opinion has been a focal point for international debate. This wasn't a binding enforcement order, but an advisory opinion carries immense moral and legal weight. It influences international opinion and can shape the policies of other nations. Predictably, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slammed the decision, while the Palestinian Authority celebrated it. This reaction highlights the deep divisions and the contrasting perspectives of the two sides. These legal proceedings have amplified international scrutiny of Israeli actions. Media coverage has brought global attention to the ongoing conflict and the legal arguments surrounding it. Despite these legal pronouncements, the situation on the ground often seems to move in the opposite direction. Construction of new settlements continues and tensions remain high. The cycle of conflict, legal challenges, and condemnations continues. Each new development adds another layer to this complex and deeply rooted struggle, making a resolution seem ever more elusive. So here we are, over a century after the Balfour Declaration and nearly 80 years since Israel's controversial birth. The echoes of history still resonate loudly in the present day, and the situation remains a complete and utter mess. The streets of Israel and Palestine are often scenes of chaos and unrest. The historical and legal complexities are staggering, with layers of international law and historical grievances intertwined, and the human cost is almost immeasurable. Families are torn apart, and generations grow up knowing only conflict. The recent pronouncements from the International Court of Justice have added a new voice to the international chorus calling for change. These legal opinions, however, often clash with political realities on the ground. Yet the immediate reactions from the Israeli government suggest that such legal opinions are unlikely to shift entrenched positions on their own. Political leaders remain steadfast in their views. The calls for a two-state solution persist, echoing through diplomatic channels and peace talks. But the practical viability of such a solution diminishes with every new settlement built. Each new construction project further complicates the landscape. The humanitarian situation, especially in Gaza, continues to be an open wound. The suffering of the people there is a stark reminder of the ongoing crisis. Diplomatic efforts flare up sporadically, often driven by urgent needs to address immediate crises, often in response to a major escalation of violence. These flare-ups are a grim reminder of the volatility of the region. Ultimately, the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty and pessimism. The future remains unclear, with many fearing more of the same. But hey, at least we tried to understand it. In the end, understanding is the first step towards any meaningful change.